In this week's edition of the Marvel Snap Best Decks of the Week, we're talking about 10 unique deck lists and a couple hidden gems, all of which have been crafted using a variety of different sources and statistics to ensure that you're getting the best decks in Marvel Snap to help you rank up and find success on the ranked ladder. Let's get started with deck number 1, and if you're playing any Marvel Snap at all, it would come to no surprise that the Stature Turn 6 deck is the one to talk about this week. It's the top of the meta right now. It is being very frequently played, and it needs no introduction, but I'll give it a quick overview for those that might still be new. You got that Black Bolt on turn 5, you move the Jeff, and then what you have is a turn 6 where you have Stature as a 1 cost, you have Miles Morales as a 1 cost, and you can play Darkhawk, or you can play the Rock Slide for a Darkhawk that's already been played, the newly nerfed Rock Slide. It'll pump 2 rocks into the deck, increasing Darkhawk by 4, and you also have the option of playing Stature, Miles Morales, and one of the tech cards, whether it be Enchantress for, those Patriot players or the Darkhawk players, or Shang-Chi to hit those Devil Dinos and anything else in between. Ultimately, this is an excellent list. It does well to work with Nebula, one of the best Season Pass cards we've gotten in some time. And overall, it's a very, very strong list that continues to do work in the current meta. Sera Control continues to be one of the absolute best archetypes in the Marvel Snap meta. Last week, we talked about the Sera Control in a much more traditional format, and this time we're talking about the Sera Monkey Control edition, which I think has a higher top end where you can actually really burst this monkey up on turn 6, especially in conjunction with Bishop, Angela, and of course Mysterio, who acts as 3 individual procs for both Bishop and of course the Hit Monkey itself. You have control tools like the Scarlet Witch. You can take out the Nebulas, which are ever so present with the Killmonger. You have the Shang-Chi Enchantress, and of course you have Sera. Enchantress is being taken out a little bit. The stat drop of the 4-5 is not as exciting as a 4-6, but it is still very useful, I should say. Good choice of wording there, Alex. It's still very useful in the current meta because you are still seeing some Patriot and ongoing, especially with the Darkhawks, which are very frequent as well. And somehow the Darkhawks are often sitting at 8 power, right? That nerf gets them to 8 power, not 9 very often. And then what happens is Shang-Chi can't hit them, but Enchantress still can. So there's still a lot of value in having the Enchantress. Polaris is an excellent counterplay to the Galactuses that are very frequent. And ultimately, this deck gives you a lot of control and a lot of options. And the thing I like about it is you never really feel like you're out of a game. You always have an answer. I can't help but smile when talking about, by far, my favorite archetype in Marvel Snap right now, and it is Discard. There's so much to love about this list. You got Nebula in here, which works wonderfully with a turn 2 Morbius into Storm. That location is pretty much won, and if it's not won and they contest it, the Dracula will almost certainly finish the job. You have very consistent discards in Calling Wing, taking out the lowest cost card, allowing you to replicate swarms or dropping that Wolverine onto the field of play while also buffing Morbius. You got the Lady Sif, which runs up the Apocalypse, and ultimately you got the most consistent discard card in the game in MODOK that just basically discards everything, procs your Apocalypse, just waiting to get hit by Dracula and allowing you to play that America Chavez on turn 6. I absolutely love this deck. It is the one that I had the most success when climbing towards Infinite, and I'm sure it'll be successful for you as well. I gotta be honest with you, Cozy's Rocks and Hawks tournament style deck list has remained an absolute staple in the meta. I mean, it hasn't gone away. Rocks and Hawks is still legit. And of course, I mean, the cozy touch of having Agent Coulson in here just never gets old. I absolutely love Coulson, and this is just a great list. Moon Girl giving you the option to play multiple Devil Dinosaurs on 5 and 6. You got the She-Hulk, which of course, if you Moon Girl the She-Hulk and then you want to essentially, skip turn 5 and get a couple cheap She-Hulks out there, it's great. Especially if you want to get you skip turn 5, you have 2 She-Hulks. They cost 1 each. That allows you to have 4 additional mana for something like a Shang-Chi. There's a lot to enjoy with this list. You got the Mystique follow-up to Devil Dinosaur, Mystique follow-up to Darkhawk as well. And if Zabu is on the board, you do have the turn 6 Darkhawk into Mystique combination. There's so much to love about this list. You even have the Cosmo counteract towards the Galactus players. I mean, Galactus players, they love Cosmo. What can we say, right? But ultimately, I really do think Rocks and Hawks is still a list you can turn to. And with the nerf to Enchantress, you're seeing a little less of it, which gives Rocks and Hawks a little more room to breathe. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to talk about Galactus, but here we are. It's still a major part of the meta right now. Its win rate isn't actually that great. It's like in the mid to low 50s, which is okay, like 52, 53. Some lists are getting around the 51 range. So it's not like a crazy winning deck, but it's super annoying. The play pattern is really predictable, and I know people are just kind of getting sick of it. There's a lot of answers to it. We talk about every single deck we're talking about here because of the prevalence of Galactus. Like we have the Polarises, we have the Cosmos, we have these answers, right? And I do like this list a lot if you are going to be playing Galactus. It has every toxic component in it. Of course, you got the Yondu Wolverine into Wave and straight up Galactus. You got the Destroyer option as well. You got the Dr. Octopus. You got the Null. You got the Spooderman. There's so many options here. It is the straight up toxic Galactus list that you're seeing nonstop on the ladder, but still we got to talk about it because it's a big part of the current meta. Now, I know I was talking about how discard was my favorite archetype in Marvel Snap just prior, and it is. It's definitely my favorite right now, but a close second is Silver Surfer. I just can't get enough of this list, and it's kind of funny that even with Nebula and all these other cards coming out, we still find ourselves playing this kind of traditional Silver Surfer list. It just performs well. It does exactly what you want to do. It has multiple counters to Galactus and Goose and in Polaris. It just does work, right? And even Storm's kind of a counter because it kind of restricts their ability to play in locations. So I like it a lot. Now, one thing I will say, this is a very tried, tested, and true list, but one thing I like doing personally, and this is the meta version, but what I like doing, the Alex version, is you get rid of the Scorpion and you add Maria Hill. I love Maria Hill because it gives you that extra 1 cost, and the nice thing about the 1 cost is when you Storm turn 3, you Jug turn 4, you have that extra 1 cost that you can play for some additional value, right? Usually it's the Nova as well. Like if you're holding Nova, it's a good time to play it on turn 4, but ultimately I do like having the Maria Hill as a 2/3 that gives you the extra 1 drop for that Juggernaut play to lock down that location. I love this list. It gives you so much control, and ultimately, like if you have Silver Surfer and you want to play Silver Surfer, it's a really good time. It'll get you an infinite. Traditional Deathwave. I mean, it doesn't get much more bread and butter than this. This is like the cookie cutter bread and butter kind of. I'm going to get to infinite deck in Marvel Snap, and honestly, like if you ask anybody, like in my chats and in my comment section, people are like, I'm taking Deathwave to infinite. It's been pretty solid, and it's great. Now we are kind of awaiting the potential for changes to Wave. Glenn kind of did mention that there's the potential that they're going to make some modifications to Wave. What those might be, I don't know. Is it going to be like they literally just cost 4, discounting doesn't exist anymore, and that kind of destroys She-Hulk? And this list will look very different if that happens. But ultimately, right now, what you're doing is you're running as much death stuff as you can, including Squirrel Girl, so you can feast on these squirrels with something like a Killmonger. And then what you're doing as well, you got the Yondu, which activates a death proc as well. Everything's getting death down to at least 4. Once you destroy 4 cards, you play the Wave, death becomes free. If you don't have Wave, you got to destroy a little more, right? So I do love this Death Wave style because if you do destroy 4 and you wave on 5, you can effectively play She-Hulk for 2, Death for 0, and then 1 of Doctor Doom, Arrow, or Enchantress, which is honestly insane. So Deathwave is a very consistent deck, and once you get the hang of playing it, you're going to find yourself gaining cubes. Perhaps the reason why there's so much discussion about maybe nerfing Wave is that here we are, another Wave 5-centric deck. Yes, Wave is an absolutely fantastic card. In Wave's defense, though, okay, I see it kind of similar to Leech, where you're playing just Wave on turn 5, and you're playing only 3 power. Leech is only 3 power too, and it disrupts their turn 6. It also disrupts their turn 6, obviously, Wave, with that soft Sandman style effect. But again, this deck is basically without the death package, right? You do have Lizard. You have all like the initiative giving cards here. This is relatively inexpensive, right? You got Iceman, Scorpion, which is great. The White Queen, which I just don't get enough of. And then, of course, on turn 6, you have She-Hulk, and then you have 1 of Doctor Doom, Arrow, and Chavez. It's a little more straightforward to pilot because you're not running the death style mechanics. The top end of the Deathwave style deck is bigger, obviously, because you have the death itself on in addition to what you're doing on Doomwave. But Doomwave is going to be a little better at maintaining turn initiative and has a couple other big tools like obviously Mr. Fantastic, and White Queen. So there's a couple other things happening here. So I do think that both these lists are kind of going hand in hand in the current meta, but both are highly reliable with very good win rates. And now we're on to our hidden gems, and these are decks that are performing exceptionally well with high win rates with a relatively low percentage of active play. Now this is exciting because your opponents won't know how to react to these. They're not meta defining. So like when you see the stature based list, like you know exactly what's happening. And I think that if you're trying to get to infinite or trying to rank up or get to 64, the free variant, I think knowing what your opponent is playing is super helpful. And when you have a deck like this one that's a little less obvious, then you are often at the advantage because when you snap and they snap, they really can't predict what you're going to do. And I do love this Thanos Disrupt and Control list. I think it's really awesome. I love the Hood into Viper play on turn 1 and 2. It's one of my absolute favorite. You do have Titania as well. Daredevil's package that you can use in conjunction with both Spider-Man, which is honestly a great turn 5 play with Daredevil. Obviously, Prophax, which is beautiful. And of course, you have the Valkyrie as well if you're going to shut down a lane and completely lock it. But The thing I love here is that if you play Valkyrie and you lock down a quad lane that your opponent has, Blue Marvel obviously is going to help you win that there. But you also have the stones themselves working for you. So the Soul Stone works very, very well with Valkyrie, because if you Valkyrie the Soul Stone, it becomes a 3 and it drops everything on that lane by 1, guaranteeing you the win. There's also that ongoing effect there, which is great, which is why you saw some spectrums in styles like this. You got the Green Goblin, which obviously occupies board space on the opposite side of the board. It also gives you some counterplay versus Galactus. And that is also exactly what Polaris does as well. Overall, this has a very high win rate. And, oh, I should mention as well, if you're really stuck, you can technically Titania over the Galactus side as well, which is a little ridiculous, but Titania technically a fun little counter to Galactus. But regardless, I do think that this deck list is not being played enough. It has a very high win rate, and ultimately is one that you can, with some practice, seriously do some climbing with. The next hidden gem of the week is Moon Monkey. Anytime you get to play Moon Girl, it's a really exciting time. You got Hit Monkey in here as well, and ultimately this is a deck that has that duplication effect of Moon Girl, which gives you these crazy miracle plays on turn 6, which might honestly be a skip turn 5 into She-Hulk, multiple She-Hulks. You also have multiple She-Hulks into multiple Hit Monkeys, which is absolutely crazy. You can have Mysterio. All these things just combo beautifully in multiples on the end of the game, right? Naturally, Sunspot, Nebula, Quinjet, and others will want to be on the board. Quinjet's used to reduce the cost of the cards that Moon Girl replicates, which obviously makes things like She-Hulk and Green Goblin, but specifically Mysterio, more valuable because Mysterio will be a 1 cost. It also works very well with Hitmonkey itself, now that the replicated version of Hitmonkey will be 1 cost as well. So Quinjet does work in this list, and ultimately it's one that has a very high win rate, a relatively low percentage played. So if your opponent sees you Moon Girl and then, like, I don't know if they're going to be expecting Hitmonkey, Mysterios, and She-Hulks flying all over the board, right? So it could be something that catches opponents by surprise and allows you to steal some cubes. I got another video for you down below. Thank you so much for all your support of my content. Press the like button if you'd like to support the series, and I'll see you in the next Marvel Snap video.